My open letter to the Interagency Autism Coordinating Committee, the IACC, meeting of January 14th, 2014. I understand that my written perspectives will arrive too late for the public comment deadline of January 8th. At the urging of several people, and in support of the great advocacy work of Carolyn Gamicia, Carol Fruscella, Michelle Guppy, and others, I am submitting these comments. As a parent who has been on the front lines of autism over the past several decades, there is not much indifference from within the ranks of the political, medical, or psychological communities that surprises me anymore. Millions of other parents, just like me, have sought reasonability and common decency from the majority in those ranks for years, only to receive intolerance and indecent commonness in return. Frankly speaking, no particular educational degree and no special initials after one's name is an excuse for such treatment. Much to the dismay of those who have chosen to arrogantly dismiss our parental concerns for our own children, and much to the chagrin of those who would elect to view our advocacy for our children as inconvenient to accepted professional biases regarding autism, we in the parent community are still here, are still convicted, and have no imposed deadline for giving up on our kids. My own child was 4 years old when he was first in the news for his tremendous response to a serendipitous infusion with natural porcine secretin hormone. He will be 21 years old in 2 weeks. Thank God I paid no attention to our detractors. Thank goodness we continued to seek medical help from compassionate and dedicated doctors who were capable of actually thinking out of their proverbial medical boxes. Today he is almost indistinguishable from his typical peers, and actually much smarter than most of them. Back then, few doctors would listen to our hunches about biomedical connections to autism, and even fewer would heed our pleadings to treat intestinal involvement as part of the diagnosis. There were also some who actively sought to sabotage our efforts and our desires to help our fellow parents who had children with similar issues. One such doctor in this last group actually sits on the IACC today. Personally, I now believe his interest in the ongoing welfare of our community of children to be counterfeit at best. It makes a mockery of a process upon which so much rests for so many well-deserving and dedicated families and their affected children. One of the highlights of the November 2013 meeting was witnessing one of the female doctors proudly declaring that when the IACC had convened in 2009, the committee had concluded that there might be some biomedical connections worth exploring. I watched this proclamation in abject amazement, stunned that so many at the IACC could have come to the party so late. It seemed incredulous that if they finally had begun to believe what the parent community had been saying to them for over a decade prior, it was beyond disgraceful that research funding for such biomedical connections had not been adequately allocated or emphasized. 4 years later, in November 2013, it was obvious to anyone watching the proceedings that this sort of lip service had likely impressed no one, except perhaps those sitting around the big, important IACC table. Which brings me conveniently to my next observation. Aside from that which was discussed in the November 2013 meeting, or not discussed as the case seems to be, there was a very powerful visual about the meeting that serves as a sad metaphor for the state of relations between the IACC and the autism community, and which speaks volumes for precisely why real progress has been near non-existent for so very long. With the important people seated around the table, name placards and impressive credentials front and center, the few parent attendees sat off to the corner of the room, waiting patiently for their 5-minute turn to talk. Ladies and gentlemen of the IACC, is there any reason why the parents who know the most about and who care for our children should not have a seat at the table with you? Is there a good reason their voices should not have a place in every facet of your discussions? Especially considering that your committee saw fit to acknowledge intestinal involvement fully 9 years after thousands of parents were castigated and ridiculed for suggesting the same. Do you not think it might be prudent to finally engage those people now? Granted, they might not have MD after their name, but they are most certainly your intellectual equals. Whether you are willing to believe it or not, every single person on your committee could learn a lot from our community, especially as regards our children with autism. To suggest otherwise or to continue to proceed in such a self-righteous and sanctimonious fashion is both futile and unproductive. The autism community is tired of this kind of window dressing. We also seek funding that benefits our children directly, not that which merely props up academicians. The parent community rejects forums wherein objectives are discussed, but where accountability and follow-through are largely non-existent. Most of you would be hard-pressed to look at the members of the parent community in the eye, figuratively or literally, if you had to account for the billion-dollar tab that has already been spent. You would be embarrassed if you had to explain definitively exactly what has been accomplished, discovered, or directly helped our children with autism with those funds. Perhaps that's why keeping our parent voices in the back corner of the room is such an effective strategy for you to employ. I will offer an analogy as I close with some words from the movie Gangs of New York. Those who have seen the film know that it creatively illustrates the dynamics of a sort of personal civil war. The corruption of the New York establishment comes face to face with the growing population of Irish immigrants reaching the shores of that city. Leonardo DiCaprio's character represents the latter group, and toward the end of the movie he observes, "The earth turns, but we don't feel it move." Then one night you look up and the sky's on fire. I submit to the members of the IACC that there has been a civil war that has affected the autism community for decades. There are establishment doctors, psychologists, and other professionals who defend their positions and their turf in spite of the facts, in spite of parental outcries, and in the absence of factual information or proven research that favors their faulty assertions. A few from within these groups have crossed the equivalent of the thin blue line with their colleagues to ally and partner with parents like myself. They are the ones who know that the earth has indeed been turning. Parents of children with autism feel it move every single day. In fact, for many among us, it has been a veritable earthquake of mental, emotional, social, spiritual, and financial movement. Unfortunately, the inaction and the wrongful actions of the IACC seem to indicate that it doesn't really feel it move yet. I would, however, caution each IACC committee member to look up and see that the sky is already on fire. The sky is on fire with an epidemic of new children being diagnosed each and every day. The sky is on fire with children who have grown up in the past 2 decades with no group homes or adequate help today as they enter adulthood. The sky is on fire with parents whose lives have been shredded because little to no help has been there for them and their children. Most importantly, the sky is on fire because this community has some of the most passionate and dedicated warrior moms and warrior dads who are not going to be relegated to the back corner of the room by you, your actions, or your inactions. To do such, to try and dismiss us, our perspectives, or our knowledge of our own children, is just another reminder of our family's suffering. From our great and growing numbers comes great strength. We are still gathered, and our drums are still beating. Tonight, I urge my fellow parents to keep their lighted candles in their windows so friends and allies will know how to help them in the dark. Keep them burning so those who are in the position to help, such as those on the IACC, know that you and your children with autism will never be placated by lip service. Keep them burning to signal that you and your convictions will not go away until the day when our 1 in 88 personally can have an equal place and voice at the table with members of the IACC and with those in professions that they represent. I urge that you never become complacent in your advocacy. The only thing that isn't moving fast enough in the world of autism is progress.